So tonight we're going to be talking about phasing. Now, when you folks have worked on projects in the past, you would have done, everything okay there, Henry?
I just want to make sure that...
Oh, the light was off, yeah, okay. In the past, if you were doing a project where you wanted to draw an existing building and then add on to it, you might use layers. You might do a save as and work on it in a separate file. But Revit has a way of handling your project as it goes through time. So if you have an existing building, you can draw up that existing building and then make modifications to it. You can demolish certain walls so that you can get through those walls to the addition that you are creating. So let's show you how you get started with this stuff. Now, there's some underlying concepts that you need to understand. Each view in Revit has a phase that it is assigned to. So if you scroll down in your properties in a floor plan view or any view, you'll see at the bottom, very, very bottom of the list, phase. So this is the phase of the view. Now when you click this drop-down menu here, there's two choices, existing and new construction. Now, when you're working with one of Revit's templates, all views that you create are going to be created in the new construction phase. So, if you're going to model an existing building, you're going to want to create some views whose phase setting is not new construction, but existing. So what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to change the phase setting of this view. Instead, I'm going to take my level 1 floor plan and I'm going to make a copy of it. Now this copy, I'm going to rename it and call it existing. So there's my copy, and I'm going to rename it now so I know that it's looking at the existing phase. The next thing I'll do, of course, is set the phase of the view to look at the existing state of the building. Now, I haven't drawn anything yet, but this is just setting me up so I can draw that existing part of the building. Now, you'll notice that as soon as I made that change from new construction to existing, that the elevation markers disappeared. And that is because those elevation markers are looking at new construction as well. So there's no point in having those elevation markers in this view because they're looking at a different phase anyway. So I'll do the same with level 2. So I'll copy it and then I'll just rename it so that it's existing. And I will set its phase to existing as well. Now, where do we get these labels here, existing and new construction? Well, if we go to the Manage tab and find the Phases button, here we go. This is it. So the names of these phases are completely arbitrary. They are up to you. So you could have said old building and then renovation. So here I'm just renaming the phases. So the names that you see here are the ones that you will see in the list. So there you go. So what used to be called existing is now called old building, and what used to be called new construction is now called renovation. So you can name those phases what you will. Now, whatever view you are in, whatever phase it is using, the objects that you draw will take on the phase of the view. So if I go and draw a wall now, these walls that appear, if I go and look at their properties, phase created. It has that setting in here, old building. So what I've essentially done here is drawn a few walls that are existing. Now, what happens to these walls when they are viewed in a later phase. So here, level 2 existing. If I go to level 2 now, you might notice that the walls appear gray. In the existing view, they are black. But once seen in a later phase, these walls appear gray. And this is by design. Now you can change this, but the idea being is that Revit wants you to be able to graphically distinguish between existing geometry in your project and new geometry that you are going to add. So what I'm going to do here is just add a little U-shaped extension on the edge of this wall. So I've gone to my level 2 floor plan, and I'm going to add some more walls, and you'll see that these ones look graphically different than my existing walls. So here, if you look, you can see quite clearly there's a graphical difference between your existing walls and the new walls that you're going to add. So views have phases, objects have phases, and clearly views have a way of being able to graphically differentiate between what is geometry from a prior phase and what is geometry from the current phase. So let's get into this a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the Manage tab and back into the Phases dialog. Now, along with the phase setting in each one of your views, you'll also see that there is a phase filter. And by default, it is Show All. So both the phase and the phase filter are both viewable in the Phases dialog box. They're just on different tabs. So if you look at the Phase Filters tab, there is Show All at the top. Now it's grayed out. That's because you can't change it. So this, what they call a phase filter, is locked down. You cannot change its settings. Now you'll notice that there are 4 categories. You have new objects, existing objects, demolished, and temporary. Now, just for a moment here, let's flip over to the second page and go halfway down page 2. So what is a new object? A new object is one that's been created in the same phase as the current view. So right now, I'm in the level 2 plan. Its phase is renovation. So whenever I draw walls or any kind of 3D geometry in this view, like a door or another wall, the phase of this door will be made to match the current view, renovation. So now if I click on this wall, its phase created is renovation. Click on the door, same thing. So as far as Revit is concerned, these objects, because they match the same phase as the view, Revit calls them new. So that is the definition of new when we go and look in the Phases dialog box. So on Phase Filters, inside the Phasing dialog box, new means created in the same phase as the current view. Now existing means objects from an earlier phase than the current view. So let's just step back in time here a little bit. So when we go back to the level 2 existing plan, Revit considers these walls that were created here new as far as this view is concerned. But wait, it says existing, and the name of the phase is old building. Why are these new? Well, in this view, these walls are new because they were created in the same phase as this view. So again, when we go back and look at the Phases dialog box for phase filters, as far as this view, level 2 existing, is concerned, those walls and any other geometry created in this view will be new. created in the same phase as this view. Now, these walls are being carried forward into a later phase, and they appear gray. So an object that comes in from a prior phase, compared with the view, is called existing. So when I go into phases here, the existing column means objects from prior phases that are carried forward. So regardless of the name of the phase, if it comes from an earlier phase, it's called existing. It's labeled as existing. Now, what I want to do is I want to cut out this wall here, this piece of wall, so we can get into our new area. Now, I don't want to get rid of the entire wall, just this piece. So what's going to happen is I'm going to use the split command, and I'm just going to split this wall here in two places, and I'm going to adjust how these walls connect here. I'll do it on the other side as well. Because now I'm going to demolish this wall. So demolish means to destroy it in the phase of the view that I am in. So this is a wall from a prior phase. I'm in my renovation phase in this view. And so this wall from a prior phase, I can demolish it. There is a really wonderful and fun tool to use called the Demolish Tool. It's like Thor's hammer. So you click that thing. See a little hammer tool? It's on the Modify tab. Go and find that hammer command. It's right here by the cursor. It's right by the Move tool. Go and click on that wall now, and aha, it's dashed. Now what I'll do is I'll just adjust its length so that it intersects back with our wall here. And so we are going to demolish this part of the building so that we can get through to the outside. So when we go back to the phases dialog box, you can see on the phase filters tab there is a demolished column. So that means objects from a prior phase are being demolished in the current phase of the view. So we've got existing objects, and we've got our old building phase, and then we've got our renovation phase. So in the renovation phase, that wall is being demolished. So if we click on that wall's properties here, remember that I used that hammer tool on it, the Demolish tool. Look at its properties now. Phase created, old building. Phase demolished, renovation. So that is what Revit categorizes as a demolished object in the Phases dialog box on the Phase Filters tab. So there it is, demolished. Now finally, the last category is temporary. That is an object that is created and demolished in the same phase. And you're thinking, well, why would you do that? Yes?
That new existing wall is temporary. That doesn't show up in the properties at all. It's just how it
Well, yeah, we'll get there. There's a reason behind these four columns, as we will see in a couple of minutes. Now, an object that is created and destroyed in the same phase could be something like hoarding. So if you have construction hoarding around the outside of a site, you're trying to protect people from getting in there, and you're going to remove it afterwards, that would be hoarding. So here, I'm in my renovation view. If I now create some walls around the outside, now I'm not bothering to change wall types here, I'm just illustrating the principles. So now what I'm doing is I'm using the Demolish tool on objects created in this phase, same phase as this view, and instead of being black and dashed, they are blue and dashed. So here we've got everything. We have existing objects that aren't getting demolished. We've got new objects. We've got existing objects that are getting demolished. And finally, we've got new objects that are getting demolished in the same phase as the current view. And when you look at phase created and phase demolished, they are both renovation. Now, one more little wrinkle here to throw. What happens if in this view I have some temporary objects here as well? So you can see these walls here I've just added. The reason that you see these notches here is because it's interacting with walls from the future. I won't explain how we could avoid that, but that's what's going on. So these walls here, I can demolish them now, and I don't have to use the hammer tool. I can simply select them all and set their phase demolished to be the same as my existing phase, my old building phase. So you can see now they're blue in this view. Now what happens when I go to the future? They don't appear at all. So an object that is demolished in an earlier phase will not be seen in a later phase. So what have we got here? So in my existing floor plan, I've got some walls that I created, and their properties are such that they're created and demolished in my existing phase. So that's why they've got this blue appearance. And then later in the next phase, they don't appear at all. Yes? Okay, that could be, and that could be because of your phase filter settings. So we're going to get to that now. Now, on the phases dialog box, we've talked about these two tabs so far. So you'll notice with phase filters, there's 7 of them here. There is show all, and for the new category of objects, if it's a new object, Revit says that for the show all phase filter, it's going to be shown by category, and that means as per object styles. Now if you folks have forgotten about good old object styles, what that is, it's the dialog box where you set your line weights for the project. Now I warn people when they take the intro class that object styles is the place to change the line weights for your project. If you're not happy about something's line weight, go into object styles and the numbers are all here. Now those of you who are diggers, you know, are trying to dig a little deeper into how Revit works, all these numbers that you see here in this table refer back to, in the additional settings dialog box, Revit's line weights table. So with walls, line weight number 2 in projection, line weight number 5 when cut in plan or cut in section. So walls 2 and 5. What's 2 and 5 mean? Well, on additional settings and line weights, there we go. So there's line weight number 2, and you can see how it changes its weight or its thickness over different scales. And here's line weight 7, and you can see how its line weight changes over scale. So 2 and 5. 2 and 5 are the 2 line weights that walls use. Now, never change the numbers in the line weights dialog box. That is just, they're kind of set in stone. Yes, you can change them, but no, you shouldn't. And the reason is that the software has been tested to work with these numbers. And if you folks go online to download families from different manufacturers, they are using this table as well. So if your numbers differ from them, when you bring their families into your projects, things are going to look really weird. So I tell people that if they change this table in my intro class, I know where you live. Just don't do it. It's reprehensible. I'm sure it's one of the deadly sins. It's certainly one of the deadly sins of Revit. Do not mess with this table. If you don't like your line weights, go to object styles. So that means all of these appearances here is what we would call by category. For each category in this list, it's got its line weight and its color. Now everything's black, but there's line weights assigned. That means by category. So when we go back into the phases dialog box and look here under phase filters, so the show all phase filter, new objects, so that is objects created in the same phase as the view, their line weight, their appearance is by category. And you can see a bunch of them here, it says by category. Now, for the show all phase filter, when we get to existing objects, you can see it says overridden. Obviously, those walls from an earlier phase are not appearing black and with a heavy line weight. They are overridden. So anytime you see overridden in any of these cells on the phase filters tab, What it means here by overridden is what you see on the graphic overrides tab. So existing, demolished, new, and temporary, the columns that you see here on the phase filters tab, they become rows on the graphic overrides tab. So an existing object, an object from a prior phase, Revit overrides the appearance of those objects, and if it's being shown in elevation, it's given a gray line weight of 2. If it's being shown in plan, it's given a gray line weight of 3. Now I find this usually to be a little bit too light, so I will tend to bump the line weight up to 4. So now you'll notice that when I go back and look at those existing walls, they've got a little bit of a heavier line weight. So that's what they look like now. That's what they looked like before. You can see here these gray lines got just a tad thicker. So in phases, graphic overrides, if it's an existing object, this is the override that is given. So this is a cut existing object. So here if I want, I can also change its color. So instead of gray, you can make it pink. There you go, pink existing walls. So that's where overrides are coming in here. So if you see one of these phase filters and it says overridden, you simply go to the graphic overrides tab and you shall see how it is overridden. Now, you can see that we've got our views have phases, views have phase filters. Let's talk a little bit more about these phase filters. Now, what if you want to show your client the final rendition of how the plan is going to look? So instead of showing the existing stuff gray, you want to show the existing stuff black. And you don't want to show walls are being demolished. You don't want to show temporary walls on the site. You just want to show them the finished product. Well, that is the next phase filter, show complete. So new objects per object styles, existing objects that are not demolished per object styles, but demolished and temporary objects don't show up at all. So that is the show complete phase filter. So in any given view, if you change the phase filter to show complete, ta-da! All the walls look the same, and you can't tell by looking at the walls whether they are existing from a prior phase or new from the same phase as the view that we are in. So you folks can see how this whole thing goes together. So in conjunction with view properties and views that are set to look at certain phases and the objects themselves, which take on the phase of the current view, that's how it all goes together. Now, of course, you can even change what object or what phase an object was created in after the fact. So if you look at this wall and say, oh shoot, that's actually an existing wall, and you've drawn it in the renovation phase, no problem. Switch it to the existing phase. So now this wall, I changed the phase that it was created in. So it's quite a forgiving process in terms of getting your existing and then adding your new stuff to it. Now, just jumping back to page 1 and middle of the page there, setting up phases. If you're going to draw an existing building, it makes sense to do so sooner rather than later. But that's not even a gotcha. So if you happen to draw your whole building as new construction, no big deal. Let's show you how. So what I'm going to do here, just have a look on the screen here. I'm just going to do something quite simple. So what I've got is I'm just drawing the existing building. I'm not even thinking about my renovation. So I go and grab my wall command and I draw my walls, and I'm not even thinking about the fact that this is going to be my existing building. Don't care. I'm just drawing this thing, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is existing. And I've drawn a whole bunch of stuff, and I've got all my views set up, right? I've got all my elevations drawn. I've drawn the existing building, but I've done everything in the new construction phase. Well, should I just select all my walls, all my geometry, like just go into a 3D view and select the entire model and switch it back to existing? Nah. Because what you can do is you can go to your phases dialog box, and there's your existing. So I'm just going to say, oops, didn't use it. And then, new construction, name's arbitrary, existing. Now look what happens if you select the row number. So instead of putting your cursor in to rename the phase, you can see combine is grayed out. Put your cursor on the left side of it and select the whole thing. Aha. So now I can combine this with the previous. Now it's renamed all the phases back to this one, so I can just hit existing. So now there's only one phase in this entire project. And sure enough, when I select any one of these walls, they are existing. So now I can get into the renovation stage. I go to Manage, Phases, and I add one after. Now people sometimes ask me, should you create a demolition stage? No. The only reason that you might create a demolition stage is if it's a separate tender process and there's going to be a period of time between the demolition and when the renovation begins. And you're going to issue a bunch of drawings that are going to be just demolition and then maybe for 6 months or something like that. And then after that, the renovation would begin. And even then, I'm not convinced that you would necessarily need to have a demolition stage. But if you find that that would be helpful, no problem. So here, put my cursor on the column or on the row number, and I'm going to insert my demolition stage. So now I'd be able to have 3 phase views of any given view of the project. So I've got 3 phases here. So now that means these objects can be created in any one of those 3 phases. And it means that when I create or copy my plan views, this copied plan view that I've made, I can set its phase to be one of those 3 phases. So that means I could have a demolition phase in this view and then say that this wall is demolished in the demo phase and the building sits open for 6 months waiting for renovations to begin. Right? So then I'd have yet another copy, and I'll just rename this here. So this is the level 1 reno. This one is level 1 demo. And so this view here, demolition is its phase. I go to the level 1 renovation and I switch its phase to renovation. And you can see that wall is gone. And so now the walls of the renovation are added on to the building. So that is certainly a possibility. I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 cases in the 15 years I've used Revit, 18 years, that I've needed to have a demolition phase. So generally speaking, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, I think that's everything here. So I think we are good to just take a break here for about 10 minutes, and we'll come back and carry on.